In the summer of 1942, in the industrial city of Stalingrad, along the western bank of the Volga River, one of the most decisive battles in human history began, not just for territory, but for survival, pride, in the future of an entire war. Nazi Germany, under Adolf Hitler, had already swept across much of Europe. Now, its forces pushed deep into Soviet territory, aiming to capture the oil-rich Caucasus region. Stalingrad stood directly in their path, a city carrying not only strategic value, but also the symbolic name of Soviet leader Joseph Stalin. Hitler believed that capturing Stalingrad would break Soviet morale and secure Germany's dominance on the Eastern Front. For Stalin, losing the city that bore his name was unthinkable. Orders were clear: the city must be held at all costs. What followed was not a traditional battle of open fields and sweeping maneuvers, but a brutal, grinding conflict, fought street by street, building by building. By late August, German bombers darkened the skies over Stalingrad. Waves of air raids reduced much of the city to rubble. Factories, homes, and roads were shattered into debris. But instead of weakening Soviet resistance, the destruction transformed the city into a defensive labyrinth. Ruins became strongholds. Every collapsed wall, every broken stairwell turned into a position of resistance. As German ground forces advanced into the city, they encountered something they had not fully anticipated: an enemy that refused to retreat. Soviet soldiers, reinforced by civilians who took up arms, fought with relentless determination. The Volga River behind them became both a lifeline and a barrier.
Supplies and reinforcements crossed under constant threat of German fire, yet the flow never fully stopped. General Vasily Chuikov, tasked with defending the city, adapted quickly to the conditions. He ordered his troops to stay as close to German forces as possible, minimizing the effectiveness of enemy artillery and air support. This tactic, often described as hugging the enemy, turned the battle into close-quarters combat, where distance meant survival. Inside the city, the fighting was relentless. Factories like the Red October steel plant and the Barakati gun factory became battlegrounds of strategic importance. Control shifted back and forth, sometimes within the same day. Soldiers fought across floors, through shattered walls, and even underground in sewer systems. The environment itself became an unpredictable enemy. Dust, smoke, and constant noise disoriented both sides. For the civilians still trapped in Stalingrad, survival became a daily struggle. With food scarce and shelter limited, many lived in basements or among ruins. Despite the danger, some continued to support the war effort, carrying ammunition, tending to the wounded, or even joining the fight directly. Their presence blurred the line between front lines and home. As autumn approached, the situation grew even more desperate. German forces had pushed deep into the city, reaching the banks of the Volga in several places. At one point, they controlled nearly 90%.
Soviet leadership under General Georgy Zhukov was preparing a massive counteroffensive. While the battle raged within Stalingrad, fresh Soviet forces were quietly assembling on the flanks, areas defended not by elite German troops, but by weaker Allied units from Romania and Hungary. The stage was set for a turning point, not just within the city, but across the entire Eastern Front. The battle that began as a push for dominance was about to become a test of endurance, strategy, and the limits of human resilience. In November 1942, as winter tightened its grip over the steppes surrounding Stalingrad, the Soviet Union launched Operation Uranus, a carefully planned counteroffensive designed not to strike the strongest German positions inside the city, but to encircle them from the outside. It began with a sudden and overwhelming assault on the German flanks, where Romanian and Hungarian forces, poorly equipped for the harsh conditions, struggled to hold their lines. The attack came with speed and precision. Soviet armored units pushed through weak defensive positions, advancing rapidly across the frozen terrain. Within days, the breakthroughs widened. German command initially underestimated the scale of the offensive, believing it to be a limited operation. But as Soviet forces continued to advance, the reality became unavoidable. The German Sixth Army,
deep inside Stalingrad, was in danger of being completely surrounded. By November 23, 1942, the encirclement was complete. Nearly 300,000 Axis troops found themselves trapped inside what would soon be known as the Kessel, or cauldron. Supplies dwindled almost immediately. Food, ammunition, and medical resources became scarce. The harsh Russian winter added another layer of suffering, with temperatures dropping far below freezing. Inside the encirclement, German General Friedrich Paulus faced a critical decision. Some commanders urged an immediate breakout while there was still time, but Adolf Hitler issued a direct order. The Sixth Army was to hold its ground and await resupply. Hermann Göring, head of the German Air Force, assured Hitler that the army could be sustained by air. In reality,
The Luftwaffe lacked the capacity to deliver the necessary supplies under constant Soviet pressure and brutal weather conditions. As weeks passed, the situation deteriorated rapidly. Starvation began to take hold. Soldiers rationed what little food remained. Horses, once used for transport, were slaughtered for sustenance. Medical facilities were overwhelmed, with wounded soldiers receiving minimal care. Frostbite and disease spread quickly among exhausted troops. Meanwhile, Soviet forces tightened their grip. They did not rush into the city, but instead maintained pressure, allowing time and conditions to weaken the trapped army. Artillery bombardments and limited assaults kept the Germans pinned down, while Soviet commanders carefully avoided unnecessary losses. In December, Germany attempted a rescue operation, Operation Winter Storm, led by Field Marshal Erich von Manstein. His forces advanced toward Stalingrad from the southwest, coming within a critical distance of the encircled troops. For a brief moment, hope returned to the Sixth Army. But without permission to break out and link up with the relief force, Paulus remained trapped. Soviet resistance intensified, and the rescue effort ultimately failed. Back inside Stalingrad, conditions reached a breaking point. The once powerful German army was now fragmented, weakened, and isolated. Communication became unreliable. Morale dropped as the reality of their situation set in. There would be no rescue, no reinforcements, and no clear path to survival.
This is our final position.
For the Soviet Union, the strategy was working. The same city that had nearly fallen months earlier had now became the site of a massive strategic reversal. The battle was no longer about holding ground. It was about closing the trap completely. As January 1943 began, Soviet forces launched Operation Ring, a final offensive aimed at eliminating the encircled German troops. The pressure intensified with each passing day. The cauldron shrank, and with it, the remaining strength of the Sixth Army. The outcome was no longer uncertain. It was only a matter of time.